You asked many times. I said no. We're finally doing it. This is going to be a shortened guide for how to set up a 2-PC streaming setup and just the things you need to keep in mind. I have recently moved to that myself. I don't know if you can see it. No, you can't really see it. I have my main workstation PC back here running my streaming setup for my gaming computer and multiple cameras and things like that. And I wanted to cover the steps that are involved. This will not be a comprehensive step-by-step guide, especially since everyone's setup is different. You're going to have to do different things, so you can't really follow along if almost every aspect could be, you might have this, but you might have this, but you might have this. I'm EposVox, here to make tech easier and more fun, and you guys have asked for a 2-PC setup guide for forever, and I keep saying no because of the reasons I just described. But I'm going to walk through what you need in order to set up a 2-PC live streaming setup and things like that. But first and foremost, why? Why would you use 2 PCs for streaming? Like, isn't one good enough, especially if you have high enough end hardware? Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes that can be true. For most people, that might be true. And for a long time, that's all I ever needed. And if so, move along. Next video. But those of you who are already interested probably know why. Live streaming can impact your game performance. If you're doing games or heavy intensive tasks on your system that you want to live stream, live streaming itself is a very intensive task and can heavily impact the performance of your games or your video editing or whatever that might be. And so you want to offload that extra, workflow or workload onto another system. That's one of the main reasons. And then there's, of course, actual OBS performance itself. You can have the inverse factor where your game or video editing application or whatever you're doing can actually negatively impact your streaming performance, resulting in a very poor experience for the viewer. I've talked about this quite a few times on the channel now, the GPU allocation bug, as I refer to it in some versions of Windows and things like that. If your game is using up all of your graphics card, there's no room left for OBS to do its heavy compositing and rendering to compose your scene to actually live stream. Encoding itself, if you're doing GPU encoding, is super lightweight and not a problem, but the actual scene compositing of putting your sources together is a lot of work, and there are some situations where you just can't stream certain games, and a 2-PC setup fixes that. Lastly, of course, you can improve your stream quality by offloading it to another computer because you can run that processor super hard, using up all of it for the live stream, and thus improving your quality through lower X264 profiles and specific tunings and things like that. Now, the way you need to do this is actually fairly simple. You have 2 PCs, hooked up hopefully relatively close to each other, and you need to get the signal from PCA to PCB. PCB, that's like a motherboard, the little material they're made out of. Anyway, you can do this with a couple different ways. There are hardware methods of doing this, which is namely just a capture card. So you run the feed of your primary gaming or working computer out via HDMI from your graphics card to a capture card of some sort within your streaming computer, and then back to your monitor. Now you can clone your display if you only have a DisplayPort monitor and clone it to HDMI and then send that to the capture card. However, there are a lot of issues with that, and so generally I recommend a setup in which you can use HDMI into your capture card and back out to your monitor. There is no latency or lag or any effect on your signal running it from, with most modern capture cards at least, running it from the capture card back to your monitor. You're not going to have any lag or anything like that by doing that, but that way you have the smoothest possible setup that works with whatever format you're working with. Now, of course, choosing a capture card is based on, I have lots of capture card reviews and buying guides on my channel. Go check those out. But that's the hardware method. It's just running your video signal into a capture card that's connected to your streaming computer so it can digitize the signal and add it to OBS or XSplit or I don't know, whatever streaming program the kids these days are using. That's the hardware method. There is a software method that doesn't require a capture card, and that is a program or a framework of different programs, a codec called NDI, which is from a company called NewTek, who actually makes TriCasters, which are dedicated streaming boxes, which are super popular in like localized sports broadcasting and things like that. But they have a streaming codec, which uses very little CPU power and sends a relatively visually lossless signal over your wired network. You need to have the computers either wired together with Ethernet and sharing an internet connection somehow that way. You may need to add an extra Ethernet adapter into your computer to run a direct line between the computers, or through an Ethernet switch, assuming they're hooked up together to the same switch, or router, assuming you have a fast enough router and things like that, which for wired networking is pretty much all gigabit these days, so you should be good to go. you send it over the network, and then the computer on the other end picks up that signal, and then you can encode there without any additional hardware actually being required. So you have two different ways of handling that. That's for your video signal. Audio is where things can get a little messy. Now, the simple method is to just run your game output through HDMI to the capture card that you are recording in your streaming computer, hook up your headphones and everything to your streaming computer, and play that back to you, or monitor it through that way somehow, or run the audio through NDI as well, and then hear it in your headphones and hear your alerts and everything on your streaming computer. And if you do Discord or some voice chat or whatever, you do all of that on your streaming computer too, and you're good to go. However, this isn't perfect, and monitoring audio through a capture card can add latency and things like that. So the more complicated method tends to be a mixer of some sort, a audio mixer. This is a little mixer boards. Most people know what those are. A little hardware that literally mixes inputs and outputs of audio signals. You can have a line out from your PC to the mixer using either software to split it out to HDMI as well, so you just hear it for yourself, or use the mixer input and output to sync with your footage in software, which is what I usually do. And the mixer can also send a line back to the gaming PC for your voice chat if desired. Then you have your microphone hooked up to the mixer ideally, or to your streaming computer, mix it all together, and then you have one nice pretty stream mix that you can blend in your streaming PC sounds, your gaming PC sounds, and your microphone all together. This can get super complicated and super technical and super messy if you wanted to, but that's the gist of it. Next up, you have your alternate sources, the other things you want to include in your live stream. So your microphone, if that's running through an audio interface or a mixer, that needs to be hooked up to your streaming computer as well, so it can be taken in as a source. If you have webcams that you're bringing your face in, that needs to be moved from your gaming PC to the new streaming PC, hooked up in there and integrated into your live streaming setup. You can actually export in OBS, you can export your scene collection, and mostly import it back into another computer so you have minimal setup time to transfer between a 1 PC setup and a 2 PC setup, for example. If you have a stream deck, that needs to be moved, a macro control pad to control your live stream. That needs moved and set back up on your new computer as well, so you can control your live stream right there, and then you can use the USB cable to move it over towards your gaming setup by your mouse or something, so you can reach up and hit the buttons while you're live streaming. A big, super important thing that to me has been important for live streaming and the standard since live streaming has been a thing long before game streaming is you need multiple monitors. That way you can preview your OBS chat and things like that from your streaming computer, make sure everything's running smoothly, see what scene you're on, things like that, and monitor your chat while you're live streaming so you have people to talk to, you can see what they're saying and talk to them back. That needs to be next to your main monitor while you're playing your game. You can have that one in front of you, but then have the other one off to the side, or have a little tablet. You can buy little field monitors, run that up under your main monitor. You need to have multiple monitors so you can see what's going on. It doesn't have to be an amazing monitor for the second one. You can get one for under $100 on Amazon or your local electronics store. Just get something that works. Then of course you need to find the right balance of settings for your new streaming computer. Since you're not running anything else intensive on the computer, you can maybe switch from graphics card GPU processor encoding to CPU encoding back to x264 and lower the CPU profiles. You got to do some test streams, multiple test streams, to make sure you can get the quality and performance that the viewers will enjoy, because it's more important to have something that runs smoothly than something that looks the best but is only like 15 frames per second or gets blurry every couple of minutes or every 30 seconds really. Got to find the right balance, got to do some test streams. Go watch my OBS guides on how to optimize your settings. Lastly, it is worth noting that if you do a 2 PC setup, you generally cannot record a clean copy of your gameplay feed if you're using it in a live stream through OBS or what have you, because it doesn't run multiple encoders. Now there are a couple tricks for running multiple instances of OBS and looping them into each other so you can still, record that same source a second time. But do keep in mind, if you're not doing any live streaming or anything on your gaming PC anymore, then you can still run Shadowplay or a more lightweight copy of OBS with just your recording, just the gameplay recording setup or something like that. So you can still record a clean copy of your game locally to your gaming computer while you're live streaming over here. And that's usually a very good way to go, especially if you have Shadowplay or Relive or something which doesn't use any processing power really. That's the way to go. So again, this was not the most comprehensive guide because I can't really walk you through step by step without having your exact setup potential. Ideally in the future, when I have more resources and space to set it all up, I can walk through multiple different streaming setups for 2 PC setups and just show you step by step for multiple scenarios. But hopefully this gives you a good idea of what is involved with setting up 2 PC streaming setups. why it's so complicated, and just kind of the individual elements that you will need in order to get yours going, and then you can adapt it to your specific setup from there. I have lots of other streaming guides up on my channel if you need details